You are listening to the Drunken Pen Writing Podcast. I'm your host, Caleb James. With me, as always, Spencer, the Sumerian Snail Sniffer Church.
Oh.
Just came up with that.
Yeah.
Sniffing snails, ancient Sumerian. Today, we have a special guest. He is a reoccurring guest, and by reoccurring, I mean this is the second time on the show. So not really reoccurring, but has been on before. You can actually check out an episode we just did on his newest book, The Butcher of Nazareth. We recorded that, what was that, a month ago?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, end of February or something. So if you want a full book review, you can check that out. But I would recommend reading the book first and then listening to that episode. Author of The Fountain, NSFW, which we also covered on the show. Probably not as well, but that's when he was here last to promote the book. And today he is promoting The Butcher of Nazareth, as I mentioned. David Scott, hey, thank you for coming on.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Hey, Caleb, good to see you. Spencer, good to see you.
You as well.
The Snell thing is a revelation, but ancient, okay. Do the old ways. I like it.
That's how we get new diseases, I feel. Sniffing inanimate, or not inanimate, but might as well be inanimate. I don't know the brain structure of the snail.
Hey, we're bringing measles back. Why not? Yeah. Snail related.
Yeah. So we're talking about plagues and blasphemies. We are talking about the Butcher of Nazareth as well. I'm trying to remember exactly how I started the introduction on the episode we did. I should have probably listened back to that, but that requires effort and work. What I really enjoyed about the Butcher of Nazareth is you did the story of King Herod calling the baby. So if anyone wants to check out that, just Google it real quick if you don't know your Bible stuff. But
yeah, I believe it's called the Massacre of the Innocents.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. You went the route of what would happen if one of the people required, I think they were called the Black Mask in the book.
Yeah.
Basically King Herod's goons that were forced, they're conscripted into service to call these babies because, I mean, I don't know how much I give away because it does give away the book a little, but there's one main character that needs to be called, but that baby survives, as you would know from the Bible, and it is this butcher character's task to call this baby, who's no longer a baby but a full-grown man. So what made you want to write a story that could, I would imagine, be a hard sell for a publisher?
Why would I want to write a book about infanticide as the origin, as the spark point? For writers out there, you'll get it. And for readers out there, you might be like, huh? So I was between projects. I'd done Not Safe for Work, NSFW, which is, kind of a horror romance. It's two social media moderators trying to make it 90 days to get their health care. And that book is really dark and, reflects a lot of societal things, device addiction and all the trauma and grief we have to process, vicariously and stuff. For my next book, I didn't want to do anything contemporary. I did not want to do anything contemporary at all. And I didn't have a story light enough that I kind of wanted to give myself a little bit of a palate cleanser in terms of work. And I like to experiment with different styles and forms. The Butcher is completely different than Not Safe for Work, which is completely different from The Fountain, right? I take the term novel seriously. Everything needs to be novel. It needs to be new. It needs to be original instead of just cranking out the same thing. So I got it in my head that I was going to do a cozy mystery. I have a few. I've read a few. And so I was like, what would be a good setting for a cozy mystery? What would be unexpected?
Baby killing in Jerusalem.
I thought, oh, you know what? I'm going to do a cozy mystery with Mary Magdalene as the sleuth. And I was going to play it straight. Although the first title I came up with was Nazareth, Fine Furniture and Catering. That, I swear to God, and Mary Magdalene. And so I just started doing a little research, and like Joseph is in the Bible, and then he's not. Like he doesn't have an exit scene or anything. So I was like, okay, so he'll be the murder victim. Mary will solve that because she's betrothed to Jesus. So there's maybe some jealousy, but he doesn't want to marry her, and Mother Mary doesn't want him to get married because he's going to have his calling and go do his thing. And she can be best friends with Margaret, whose brother is Lazarus. So I can really kind of play with this stuff. And I started researching cozy mysteries, and I'm like, okay, there's a distinct formula for that. It'll be fine. It's like Will Ferrell doing a Lifetime movie, but playing it straight, right? Like I'm just going to do it, and we'll see what happens. And I was writing a list of suspects, who could have done it. You want people within the town, and then you want, outsiders to come in. And I was like, well, you need the obvious lurker. And I was like, oh, that would be like an assassin or something, right? Why would he be there? And I was spitballing with my wife, who's a writer as well. She does features and TV, and she was raised Catholic, and she goes, well, in the book of Matthew, Herod orders the killing of all male children 2 years and younger, because the three wise men, the Magi, show up, tell Herod like, hey, we're here to greet the new baby king. And he's like, wait, what? Okay, you find him and then come back and tell me where he is. And they didn't, right? And he was like, oh shit, they're overdue. They're not coming back. So, okay, we're gonna kill every male child that may grow up to threaten my reign.
Logical next step.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and I went, oh, okay. That's suspect number 8. Okay. And then you start doing the backstories like, okay, why is he back? Because it could be a bad movie, right? He comes back to finish the job, right? He thought he'd kill Jesus, but Jesus lives. Now he's on the list, right? So it's it was really silly. But I started asking questions. Okay, where's he been for the last 30 years? Because from the calling of the time, Jesus' ministry is about 30 years. Where has he been in those 30 years? What was the fallout of him doing this? Was he just a single he was just like one of the goons, or was he conscripted into it? How did he feel about it? And sometimes when you're writing or doing research, you have that little voice in your head goes like, idiot, this is your story. This is your story. If you wrote a cozy mystery and had this guy show up, everybody would be like, I want to know more about him. I would, right? He's like one of those characters like, this is the interesting guy. Why aren't we with him the whole time? And so I scrapped the cozy mystery, and I was like, I'm really, really interested in finding out about this Butcher, about this character. And, so I started buying my research materials and started reading. And it just, I thought about the structure. I wanted to do 3 books because I figured 3 stops, Bethlehem, Jerusalem, and Nazareth. Fortunately, they're all in kind of a straight line. So I knew I could do kind of the Apocalypse Now, Heart of Darkness journey. And that's what that became. That was the original impetus, was to do a cozy mystery with Mary Magdalene as a sleuth. And I might still revisit at some point, because I think that might be an easy sell. Yeah. But I don't know. I've got that in my back pocket, but it's not going to be anytime soon, just because I've finished The Butcher.
I would have never in 1,000 years guessed that was the origin of this book, was a cozy mystery. Oh man, that's wild. That would be an interesting take, though. That's a sleuth I'd never heard of, though. I think you could definitely get that into somewhere. There's definitely readers for that.
Oh yeah, I think there is. And am I a writer for that? Maybe. Like I said, as an experiment, and they have a specific formula. I looked those up. I found like a template for the pitch. You plug in the names. It's like Mad Libs. And so many people are actually fans of Mary Magdalene that it was surprising when I talked to some people about about that pitch, and they're like, oh, I would read that in a heartbeat, because she was this great historical figure, probably the most devout of Christ disciples, and and then she gets slandered as a whore and a prostitute and stuff like that, and really degraded and demoted in the Bible. So so there might be a time when I revisit that and see what I can do. Plus, I love the fact that all confrontations are face to face. You have to walk somewhere or ride your goat, or what I mean? Like, there's no letters, text, communications. The evidence is physical. Did somebody hide the knife, right? I'm not having to do DNA or anything like that. So it becomes more about characters and stories and stuff. So I may do it down the line.
So your tagline could be the Murder, She Wrote meets the Bible.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's so, every time and of course, it's tongue in cheek, because if I want to play it straight, I don't know that I can necessarily call it Nazareth Fine Furniture and Catering, although I might still, because I love that title.
You're gonna have to find a way, though, to make it to even though that it's before the whole Christ thing, you're still gonna have to find a way to work Christmas into it, because you need Christmas for a good cozy mystery.
Yeah, it's got to be able to be a play on Hallmark.
Oh shit! What would be okay? So you got candles, right? Maybe they sprinkle a little powder in the candles to get them to burn a different color. You have some druids show up with dragging trees through. They get murdered, so they plant the tree in his memory. Yeah, dude, let's do it. Here we go.
I like it.
Going into the characters, like the Butcher's such an interesting character, because I mean, he has these visions of essentially the apocalypse, which is why he's on this journey, mild spoiler, to kill Jesus finally, after failing to do so when he was a baby. the thing I liked most about the character is at first you're like, yeah, this guy's doing what he's supposed to. He's going to prevent the apocalypse and save the world, even though it's a future him or his kids or his grandkids would never even be involved in. They won't be alive. It's so far in the future. But what I liked is you just assume, oh, yeah, this guy's righteous and he's doing what's right. But then slowly throughout the book, you're like, wait a minute. What if this guy's just fucking crazy and he has like severe PTSD from killing all these babies and all this shit? And it's like, is he actually? Because you wrote this in such a way where it's like miracles and things of that nature could exist, or they could just be realistic and not exist. And you're just taking the word of the characters that these things are actually happening, that there is a God and that Jesus is the savior and all this. Yeah, because this is before Jesus died on the cross. This is before Jesus even becomes really Jesus.
Yeah.
So it's not the Christ that everyone's familiar with. It's that period where you don't know what he was doing. In turn of this book, he's another spoiler. He's kind of a fucking slob who just loves to eat honey and slop around.
When I talk about people who read the book, it's like, yeah, this is Jesus in his failure to launch mode, right? He hasn't been. He's been told he's the Son of God. Mary's like, you're the Son of God. Things are gonna be fine. And Joseph's like, I wish you would work a little bit more. I wish you would work a little bit harder until then. But we're okay.
You're not my real dad.
Yeah, right. Well, exactly. And also the book touches on that, on the nativity, right? And Joseph has a really visceral reaction of what's going on.
As he should.
Yeah, and I believe in the Bible, according to my wife, there was a point in which like an angel visited Joseph and was like, hey, back off. Okay. Stop being a dick to Mary, right? It's real, and this is what you're gonna have to deal with.
That's convenient.
But yeah, so and at that point, Jesus doesn't have I won't say a direct line to God or anything. Like he just hasn't been called, and nobody knows when that calling through his ministry is going to happen. So it's just kind of in this stasis, and Mary Magdalene's hoping to get married, and yeah, it was really fun to write that version of him, and also fun to write I don't know if fun is the right word, but exploring with the Butcher and and him firmly believing this is what's going to do. And of course he faces temptations and obstacles along the way that kind of shift his mission, and I think makes him a little bit more rootable. But I had no idea when I sat down to write the Butcher. Now I'll write an outline of the locations I'm going to know. I kind of went the structure. I know I wanted to have a little bookends on the 3 books, but I really didn't know who the Butcher was. When I sat down and wrote, I wrote that, the opening scene where the book is so much more heavy than this, but there's an opening, and then he's contemplating all this stuff as he's taking a shit, and he wipes his backside with the scarf he borrowed from the perfume merchant. Right. And that's basically the first sentence I wrote for the Butcher. And I was like, oh, okay, this is not a pious gentleman that is going on this mission. And that unlocked so many things where I was like, oh, he's gonna be able to do things, and he's gonna be an interesting character to discover. And just that opening line, like that line cracked it open for me. Now I'd done research, and I'd done location bits, and I'd about the culture and how things function and the Roman occupation, but I hadn't figured out the Butcher yet. And that line really uncracked it for me, where I was like, oh, this is going to be a fun guy to write, because he's not an everyman. He's not a hero. He's not the bland main character that, so many stories revolve around. Because, he's the side character is always the best character in a movie, right? Because they want to make him unique and want to make him pop. And you have to make choices with those kinds of characters in terms of their personality and their arc that you maybe don't make with the main character. I feel like the Butcher I was writing a side character. Like I said, he was going to be suspect number 8. And again, for me, he was the most interesting person. So writing and kind of discovering what he was about and what he had gone through was really the reason I wrote the book, to answer those questions, because I had never heard of the Massacre of the Innocents. I didn't even actually know that was what's referred to until after I'd written the book. I just called it The Culling.
Oh, yeah.
That seemed better. And also you get the culling and you get the calling. So it's kind of Jesus has one and the Butcher has his. So just on the page, it looked kind of cool. They give them a little bit of a similar vibe to their task, so to speak.
Well, you had one of the greatest side characters of all time, at least in the literature I've read, and it's a big stinking goat.
Yeah.
I love that goat.
Fucking goat. That goat. I got this great review. It's just like one of the most humbling reviews. Ginger Nuts of Horror, Jim McLeod did, that it's going to come out next week, and it's just all this really deep praise, but he got everything I was doing. And then he talks about the goat. And he goes, and there's this goat that I just like, he would do things, and sometimes I'd be like, really? And I would put the book down and have to sit with it for a minute. But the goat was, and actually I could tell you the origin of the goat if you want to hear the idea for the goat. Have you seen Robert Eggers' movie The Witch?
Yeah.
Okay. So the kids sing the song about Black Phillip, which is that goat that's, rascally and murderous or whatever.
Which apparently that goat was an asshole in real life too. I think they couldn't use it for anything else because it was like an actual evil fucking goat.
So, my take, sometimes you watch a movie or you read a book and you go, oh, my version would have been like this. Now, spoiler alert for The Witch, Anna Joy Taylor, you don't know whether she's a witch or not, right? But the goat fucks up a lot of things in there, and they have the song about Black Phillip, and I was like, oh yeah, there's no Satan, she's not a witch, it's the fucking goat. It's the goat. And then, spoiler alert, you get 2 scenes where she's a witch to confirm that she's a witch. And I was like, that seems like a studio note. Like, I feel like if you could excise those 2 scenes carefully and just leave it as the goat. So I didn't do any research to find out if that was the case or not. And then I saw a clip on, I don't know, Instagram or Reddit, I think, or Reddit or YouTube or something, of a goat walking upright. And it had some weird disease where it's painful to be on all fours, so it forces itself to stand on its hind legs and walk. And it was a black goat. I was like, that is fucking creepy. So, you throw that stuff on your shelf, and then when you're writing, it's like, oh, I didn't want to give him a horse because I didn't want him to be heroic. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna introduce this goat, and the goat is going to, have a great entrance and kind of weave itself into the story, and it'll be on there. And also, I knew there was a couple things I wanted to use the goat for later down the line, but to make the goat interesting, instead of just bleeding, doing his little cry all the time, you just got to let's use him. Let's fucking use him. And also, I have a dog I love to death, but she's a Frenchie, and she can be really stubborn, right? And just sometimes it's so frustrating, when you're taking her for a walk and she's like, yeah, I don't want to go that turn, I want to go this way. And just, suddenly she becomes 100 pounds. And, even with the training and stuff, sometimes she doesn't do it. So I was like, okay, so there's conflict right there, that he has this, this goat that can pull the cart, can, cause chaos and mischief and not really listen to him. And it just the goat developed along the way. But yeah, writing stuff for the goat was always fun.
Well, the great thing about the goat was not only does it facilitate the action and at times even move the plot forward.
That's what I was going to say. Is it really he really moves the story.
It had a purpose. It wasn't just a gross, stupid goat. It had a purpose.
Right.
But I love that almost every character that encounters the goat either has some kind of comment about the grotesqueness of this giant fucking goat, or the fact that also there's a value to the goat because they're like, well, that's a giant fucking goat. And we value giant fucking goats in this world. So it's weird. It's like nobody wants the goat, but everybody's like, that's a good goat, I guess.
Right? Yeah.
It's like,
plenty of meat, plenty of milk. Well, it's like anything with you, right? If you're going to introduce a unique element, you have to, you have to use it. You have to milk it. You have to keep folding the story back in on itself. And I've seen so many stories and movies where they get a notion and they just follow it, but they've introduced all these cool elements, but they don't keep folding them back into the story. And the goat, I don't think there's a book without the goat, right? It certainly, doesn't go where I want it to. And also just, the goat is kind of one of those spirit guides, maybe. Like you said, he advances the plot, and he kind of comes through with some shit in the moments, but he also causes chaos and stuff. So it was kind of my way of giving a little bit of a nudge that could be or could not be, a little divine help.
Well, the whole time you don't know, is this a demonic goat? What is the deal with this goat? As you read, it's like, is this goat going to turn into a fucking demon, or is this goat,
right,
like you said, a divine help or something? You just don't know, and that's what I like. And he just kept it around.
Because the story would be completely different without the goat.
Yeah, it would just be a butcher wandering the desert and shit. He needs that goat.
Yeah, like I said, it was it's like, how do you give a solitary guy an individual character, on this quest? How do you give him someone to talk to? How do you give him a companion? And how do you react? It's like Han Solo and Chewbacca, right? I mean, Han's not nearly as funny without Chewbacca around, and the goat is not Chewbacca. But you have to have a counterpoint when you're by yourself, right? When the butcher's traveling by himself, there needed to be something that could stimulate him, something they could talk to, something that can annoy him, something that could activate him. And so the original idea. Spoiler alert, he meets the wounded youth in the very opening, right? I had thought that, okay, he's going to save the youth. He'll get him fixed up in Bethlehem. And then the youth will be his traveling companion, right? And that's like low hanging fruit. That's the easy idea.
You went the darker route, which
yeah.
I liked.
I was like, maybe he dies and then it's his spirit or ghost that, rides with the butcher. And I thought, oh my God, I would throw that book across the room. And also like the wounds are pretty grievous. So we're kind of shocked he makes it as far as he does. But yeah, it was just making harder, challenging choices and also finding it was really rewarding to do that and to, have the goat be the companion instead.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just anything where I think if I read this in a book, I'm not going to hate it. It's like, why would I use that as an idea, right?
Well, if you use like the spirit thing following him around, that takes away the ambiguous nature of the divinity and everything that you were incorporating into the book until the end. So it's like definitely don't want to do that.
No, and it's also is the butcher crazy or not? Is he talking to himself or not? And it's like the ambiguity is already in there. I don't need to do it. And with his hallucinations and these visions he had when he had that fever in Egypt of the flame deluge, which is, the term I took from stole from a Canticle for Leibowitz. That's what it's post-apocalyptic age in that book. And they refer to the nuclear war as a flame deluge. So when I give him these visions, the visions include all these atrocities that were done in Christ's name, right? The Spanish Inquisition, the Crusades. And so, that leads up to the nuclear war, which he doesn't know the term. So it's, all this ash and human shadows and the sand turns to glass because it gets so superheated. So, I wanted people to go, okay, he's having these weird hallucinations, but I can check that these things actually did happen. Like he's not wrong. Mm-hmm. And if I give him a ghost to talk to, then it throws off the balance of that. And also I didn't want him to be able to share that with anybody,
Right.
And until he does, and he tried to convince him to join him, the Pharisee,
Well, by giving this more of a real world feel, you almost made this like a biblical version of The Road. Like you gave it this, like that. Yeah, it has the apocalyptic feel, one man's journey, and sidekick the goat, which I thought too. I was like, there's no way this kid lives because the way you described the injuries. I was like, if he lives, I could, because for a second I was like, maybe he's gonna have him as the companion. But I was like, if this kid lives, that really takes away the realism because what are they doing? Spitting on wounds back then? They're not healing the kid.
And if he would have lived, he wouldn't have been able to do anything.
Yeah, it would have been pointless.
Yeah, he would have been of no use. Yeah, no, you're right. You would have thrown the book across the room. I would have. And I'm like, okay, divine hand came down, and so the kid is saved. And that's not anything you want to do in the first act anyway.
Yeah. Well, the goat aside, you had a lot of really unique side characters that I actually wanted to read more about, and I was wondering which ones were your favorites to write. Because even Mary and Joseph, you wrote those in a more realistic. Like Joseph, I think we said on the episode, I think I called him like the original cuck or something, but he was kind of.
You did. Oh my God, I was rolling. I was rolling when you said that. I was like, he ain't wrong.
But he had a very unique personality. I'll just say that. But what was your favorite? Like one of your favorite characters besides like the goat and the butcher?
I like the midwife, and I think Blog Without a Face had posted a review, and I think he said that was his favorite character was the midwife because she takes no shit. She's in charge, has a negotiation with the butcher to help the youth. She's got her own thing going on, and it kind of reveals that she is kind of like almost the custodian of Bethlehem, but then she's fraternizing with the Roman soldiers. It's that was really fun. She was really fun because she doesn't automatically give respect to all the characters. Like the butcher, she's the first thing she does is slap the goat because it's trying to nibble it or fruits from the market. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, okay, she slapped the goat. This is a woman I want to okay, let's see how the butcher responds to this
for sure.
Yeah, no nonsense. And of course, the butcher hadn't seen his wife in 30 years, and there's a little bit of similarity that reminds him of her. The legionary in book 1 was fun to write too because he's just a young, youthful soldier, just trying to improve his life. It gets so much darker in book 2, section 2, with the Pharisee. And so I would say the other one it gets split. It was like the family dynamic between Mary and Joseph and Jesus, like writing that dinner scene where you're having dinner with the family and the family squabble breaks out, and it's so uncomfortable. And we've all been at dinner tables where it suddenly got really uncomfortable, and for some people that's more horrific than
Yeah.
losing a finger or the goat goring you. I tell you what was unexpectedly fun but enlightening was actually writing some scenes from Jesus' point of view. Because again, it was that question of what would Jesus look like? What would he act like? What would make him different than what you see, in these, oil paintings that hang in every church, the oil paintings on velvet, the Western Jesus, blue-eyed, lighter skinned, what's a different take on that? And also, how would he be living his life if he's being told he's the Son of God, but he hasn't had his calling yet? He really loves Mary Magdalene. They had a lot of pool play, as you said in your interview, and he's living this life of comfort, but he doesn't know if he's going to be called, in a day, in a week, in 10 years, in 20 years. He doesn't know if he's going to be called on his deathbed. And then the butcher arrives, just has a, bit of a dark night of the soul. So that was really interesting to kind of write that from a grounded point of view. And the feedback I've gotten from that has been excellent. People that are, very religious, Christians to, mild Christians to atheists have reached out to me like, that was really cool, because you're not preaching that religion is good or bad. And this Jesus character, like, I can relate to him. Like, he doesn't know, he's a little lost, right now. So, and I did a podcast with a woman who's a very devout Christian. And she's like, I want my mom to read this book. I want my preacher to read this book. First of all, it's fiction. I was like, right. And she goes, but it still deals with a lot of themes and stuff in the Bible and the take on Jesus. Cause she was like, yeah, he's not producing miracles right now. Like he doesn't have a secret weapon or anything. So I think the midwife, and then I think at the end of the day, Jesus, besides the butcher and the goat. So it was one of those things where I actually enjoyed the process of writing, the butcher's relationship to all these different kinds of people, and he has to react to them differently. And obviously his headspace changes as the book goes on, clearly. So that was fun. I felt like I was writing, the butcher character grew throughout with, different wants and needs and the way he would go about things and how that had to pivot and change when he, meets everybody, because he's never really in a power position. Right. You talk about, scenes of a grantor and a petitioner. He's always the petitioner, right? Even with the goat, right? So he's never really in a power position in most of the books. So that was fun to kind of write that problem solving.
From a writer's perspective, I really enjoyed how you handled the goat thief's character, because he wasn't a huge part of the book, but he actually gets like a full story arc. I felt like he gets like a hero's arc almost. I just thought that was cool, because he starts off as just a sniveling goat thief, and then things go awry for him, but he does come around and actually is helpful.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, because he, the goat thief wasn't in the original outlines or the beats or anything. And I'm just like, well, we've got to lose the cart and the horse, or the cart and the goat. Okay. It would be a thief, right? It's Jerusalem. They're there for the Sabbath. So there's a lot of people about. It's, people pouring in through the gates, and it would be easy, for pickpockets and, whatnot to kind of get away with that, on that day, as opposed to any other day of the week. And again, you introduce a character, you need to use him, right? He can't just be somebody that moves the plot along for this one moment. Like you have to fold him back in. He has to talk to the butcher. He has to have his own point of view. And he does. He has his own mini arc. And I wouldn't say it was fun to write, but I was like, oh, this character has his own thing going on, and also confronts the butcher about some of his ideas. Mm-hmm. So, the butcher is constantly being challenged with this philosophy, but I'm glad you said that, because I think I give him a name at one point, because there's no names. I don't name any of the characters early on in the book. I wanted it to be.
I was gonna ask you about that, if that was like a purpose of like almost nobody really has a name until we do, except Jesus and Mary and Joe, and then and stuff like that. But everybody was just kind of was their title.
Yeah, the initial was just the title, because I wanted it to be almost more fable-like and more formal. But I knew at some point, like, I'm not going to be able to write around the names of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, right? They're going to have to use those names. So at some point, you're like, okay, when do I start introducing the names? Because I didn't want the name of the butcher to be revealed until later. So you go from kind of an abstraction to he's doing all this stuff to a more concrete person that actually has a name.
Without giving away anything, was there a purpose for the butcher's real name? Like, did that come from something, or was it just a cool name you liked?
Yeah, just like that.
I took it from a Shakespearean play.
That's what I figured, but I didn't want to give it away, so I won't even name the play.
Yeah. No. But that was my thing.
I just didn't know if you actually did that deliberately for that reason, or okay.
Yeah. I did. That was my nod to my theater days. Plus, I like the name. Come to find out, it's actually a Roman name, so I was just like, well,
it kind of fits, but it works enough.
I was like, it's my book. I like the name.
There are Romans in the story, so
that's true. And who knows why he was named that by his parents.
I don't remember if I mentioned it to you or if I just talked about it on the podcast, but I got involved in some controversy because of your book. Yes, the
classics.
I'm in a classic lit group on Facebook, and I don't post on there too often for fucking reasons that'll come up. So I posted my future, like my next 3 reads or whatever, and the Butcher of Nazareth was the first one on the list that I was going to read, but I didn't even mention it because they're fairly strict about classics being discussed. I was like, oh, okay. It was just in the picture on my Goodreads thing. I had Brothers Karamazov and Gravity's Rainbow and stuff. And a lot of people started asking about the Butcher. Like, that was the only thing they cared about in this classic lit group. And I got hundreds of comments, and then all of a sudden, the whole post was gone. The lady, whoever runs it, the admin, they messaged me. It was like, can you repost that without the Butcher and all this stuff? So I said, I lied. I said I was at work and I couldn't do it. I didn't want to, fuck it. And
it's just a Facebook group.
Yeah, it's like a Facebook group. Nobody gives a fuck. And so anyway, I went ahead and did nothing, and she took it upon herself to crop the image and repost it as, I don't know, herself or something. So I don't even know if my name was on it anymore. And then people start commenting on that, asking me, hey, what, you're not reading The Butcher anymore? So I had to tell them I didn't. The lady got real mad and was like, The Butcher doesn't come out until March and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, whatever, lady. But I thought it was really interesting because besides the title, I mean, The Butcher of Nazareth is one of the fucking coolest titles.
Yeah, it is a good title.
And then the cover is also awesome. So just those two things ago, if it's just on the shelf, somebody sees that, they're going, I'm buying this fucking book.
Yeah.
Or I'm checking it out. But I think the themes of it, the biblical themes and the setting and everything might actually trick some people into thinking it's a lot older than it is. Like they might, this must be an older book.
Yeah. No, that's funny you say that because when you're writing about something like that, in that time period, you want the prose to be timeless. You want it to work because it's not set in contemporary. All the metaphors and similes are, nature based or, stars, sea, land, the moon, the sun, and those are timeless, right? Those, those have been around since we've been around. Yeah. So there was a real restraint with the prose. And I did want it to read. I did want it to read, timeless. I wouldn't say I was trying to write a classic, but I was trying to emulate that kind of emulate a style in which it wouldn't be dated in 5 years. It wouldn't be dated in 10 years. And the same thing for the cover. Like the trends in book cover design. Like now it's like the flat Helvetica font for a title, and then Angel Down. Now there's like the circle thing. I think when Lessons in Chemistry came out, it was like the fluorescent orange. When I did the Butcher, it was
titles,
it was fuchsia. Like, you walk in the bookstore and you're like, oh, is this part of a trilogy? And you're like, no, these are completely different publishers, different, authors, and it's just, and you can, with contemporary books, you can look at a cover and tell, like, basically when it was released in that time period if you follow those book trends. So working with designers, I'm always telling like, look, we're not following any trends. I want something unique. I want, I always use the word iconic, but I want something that's like has an image, right, and it hits and is memorable and sticks out from all the other ones that are out there. And it has to be related to the book and it has to have the same vibe as the book. So talking about the cover, my favorite cover, this is my favorite cover now. I love all the covers of my books except for the Russian translation of The Fountain, which is the most horrible.
Yeah, I was going to say, I saw that earlier and I was like, ew, I don't like that at all.
Dude, I pushed back on that. It's for the people who haven't seen it. It's basically a yellow cover with a stock photo of two people sitting on a bench looking at basically a blank canvas, and that's it. And there's no other design. It's a book about art, and it's like somebody remembered they had a project due and handed something in. And I actually pushed back a little bit. Like I cited art, the play is like that's actually the final reveal in that one, and they're like American audiences, and they gave me the creative brief and like big flowery language about why they were doing this and why that, and this invitation, and they did do the sprayed book edges were black. And I was like, I would rather just have the yellow cover with the black edges and the title and be done. You know, I was like, I want to be nice to work with. I want to play well with others.
Don't want to piss off the Russians.
I want them to do another book of mine. And that's a whole other story too. But Not Safe for Work, I love the cover. I worked with Tyler Lockett on that, on the Not Safe for Work, and he was fantastic. This guy gave me like 20 concepts. I picked the concept, he broke it down into like color concepts and then refined it. So, you know, the guy on the cover with the jellyfish exploding out of his head. I just love that. Like I did so much swag with just that image.
Well, it encapsulates the book perfectly too, and it's so fucking cool looking. It's just like you're drawn to it even if you're not interested in the story.
I printed up a few T-shirts and, you know, sold them and gave them to friends and stuff. And they're always like, people are always asking me about it and stuff. So I'm like, yeah, okay. So we're doing its work. So halfway through writing the book, I was like, I need some inspiration. I need to, you know, so I commissioned Tyler to do a cover for the Butcher, and I'll send you it. So we worked through again. He gave me like 20 concepts. We narrowed it down and we came up with the final one that I thought was pretty cool. And then that bastard had a $100,000 Kickstarter get the green light. And on his own work, because he does mythology, like Greek and Roman mythology, and his art is it's just so gorgeous and so great. So he didn't have time to do the spine and the back, and I wasn't going to get anybody to emulate his style. So I was like, hey man, you know, I contributed to the Kickstarter. Like I'm waiting for my copy to show up of his art book, and I was like, hey man, you know, no sweat, man. I'm really proud of you. We're still in touch. And so I was like, fuck. Now I got to do a whole new front cover. And I love the one I had, but I was scrolling through, I think I was scrolling through Reddit because I follow a lot of art accounts, and this image came up. It's actually a square image. So the front cover of the Butcher, since this is audio only, has this demon with kind of horns and elongated skull, kind of cloaked in red, standing in front of either a sun or a moon. And the book cover's off center, but the actual image is a square. And the full circle is in the middle of the square with the demon in front of it. The Angel of Disease, I think, is the title.
Oh, nice.
By Samuel Aart. I can't remember the pronunciation of his name. Samuel Araya, Araya. And I saw it, and it stopped me in my tracks. And you guys have read the book. I was like, holy shit! Like that is pulled out of my head. Oh my God, I've got to. And so I contacted Miette. I was like, I need to license this. And she looked at, she was like, holy shit, is that a commission? I was like, no, like this exists in the world already. And so I reached out to him, and he does Adam Neville, the horror writer. He does a lot of his covers, but they hadn't used this one. So I reached out to him, licensed it, and then hired a dear friend of mine's son, who I've known since he was 4, had gone to Studio Arts, and so I hired him, and he did the back painting illustration, did the layout for it. So yeah, so that book cover was unexpected with what I thought in my head the book was going to look like, but it fit so perfectly that and people respond to it. You know, my favorite compliment was like, "This is the most metal cover ever."
Well, I mean, that's probably why everybody in the literature group
was drawn to it.
It was because of the cover. Because that's the only thing they knew about it.
Well, as soon as you see it, because the covers on the books and the other pictures were kind of basic, just covers, and then that one just really stuck out. So like, oh, what is that?
Yeah, we for the pre-orders, what I did is I told Miette, I said, look, for the pre-orders, and I want to give people an incentive to order the pre-orders, so we kind of have an idea. The pre-order special edition, the front cover has absolutely no text on it. It's just the image. And the back cover has no text on it, no blurb, doesn't even have a barcode on it. So when you get the pre-order version, will just be artwork on the front, artwork on the back. And I had to keep the spine because I don't want to torture people. They put it on their bookshelf, right? Because I've got some books like that don't have anything on the spine. And I'm like, Jesus, okay, I get it. You're clever. Well, help a brother out. And because I just love the artwork, same thing with Not Safe for Work. Like 90% of the swag I did didn't have any text on it just because I love the art so much. And then, of course, people ask, "Oh, what is this?" I was like, "Oh, that's the image for the cover of this book." And I'm like, "Oh," and then you go from there.
There's one thing I found interesting in this, and I don't know if it's just because we got the ARC copy or if it's in the final one. The formatting with the wider margins, is that in the actual final copy? Because you had like pictures of bugs and stuff in it.
The bees, Caleb.
The bees.
And honey, right?
Bees.
Makes sense.
The
Yes.
bees and honeycomb.
Bees are a bug, by the way. Just so you know.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So David McNamara, I had seen some of his work. I hired him to do the interior, and the arcs came back like that. Because here I'm thinking like, oh, this is going to be my thinnest book ever because it's the shortest word count wise, but it's most punchy, So, so when I got the book back, I was like, how are we at 300 pages? Because there's no way. And then I saw the margins and the wide margins, and I'm like this guy's a shit good designer. Like he really is. And I'm flummoxed by how wide the margin is around the thumb, on the thumb sides and on the bottom. And I know the publisher was like, does this need to be like increased by 20%? Is this an error? And Dave does meticulous research, and he's like, no, it's using the golden spiral ratio of, older textbooks or older texts, older books. Mm-hmm. I was like, yeah, that's not gonna, like, it worked because I hand stamp all those B's, right? Because I like to have little illustrations in there. And so, all the pre-orders are going to have those, have those B stamps. So we adjusted the margins, still alluding to the golden ratio, that stuff. So it reads easier. We have a bigger gutter. There's less rooms to play with the B's, which now I'm like, oh shit, okay, we have to figure this out, the stamps. And then I get ads constantly from the Folio Society. Yeah. And which they do these, hardcover special editions of, classic books.
I get like 5 a day.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, that's like, I'll allow those ads because I like to see that Blood Meridian and, they have all this stuff. So they had a canticle for Leibowitz, and they had a picture of the book open, and it was the same margin ratio where everything is kind of moved closer to the gutter, but it had those huge margins on the outside edge and on the bottom. And I was like, oh, that's where he got that from. And maybe if you have a hardcover, like, it works because the hardcover's a little bigger, but for the paperback, it didn't, and people just weren't getting it. It was confusing people. Mm-hmm. Like, is this printed the wrong size? Look at all this dead space. And honestly, now when I have a run of the regular cover edition ones in the house, I actually I got so used to looking at it, I actually miss the wider margins now. But
is that like the same with like the paragraph breaks too? Like, because like there's always a space between everything other than like how normal, like, there's no indentations, and at least in the
that was I'm glad you picked up on it. That was just part of the interior design. And again, I think he read a lot of more classic text. I think that's an older kind of style.
That's what I was gonna say. It made it feel like how we were talking about like an older story. It kind of helped push it that way. And I just didn't know if that was a meant to thing, or like if that was just like a happy accident, or.
No, that was a design choice. And when I got it back, I loved the look of it. And anytime as a screenwriter as well, they always talk about writing down the page. So the more white space you can add, your eyes, travel quicker down there, because you can pick up a, Jose Saramago, and it's just like the whole book is one paragraph, right? And from my brain, I'm like, I'm going to get lost in the density here. But this doesn't feel like people would pick it up and go, oh, okay, it's 300 pages, but there's a lot of white space, and it's a quicker read.
Well, since you have some experience with this formatting stuff, now you might be able to answer a question I've had for a little bit. Do you know why Starlight does double space in their books?
Okay. I love the folks at Starlight Pulp. I love them. They have the best merch. They're very cool. They are also very get her done. The outside, I love their covers. The inside
drives me fucking nuts.
Flummoxes me. And my thought was, is this supposed to mimic old school typewriter? But they don't use a typewriter font, right? No. So is it supposed to mimic that kind of like a manuscript style, right? That's the only thought. I haven't talked to Brian about it. I haven't asked him about it. But I'm also like, if you're into that, why are you using bright white pages? Like, I would have gone with the cream, something that makes it look a little, so, because, the Butcher pages are not white. They're off-white cream or whatever. And it just makes for it's an easier on your eyes. And I don't know. I don't know why they had that layout for that. At some point I'll ask him.
I thought about having him on the podcast, and that'd be one of the questions. Because I thought too, it was like, maybe that's supposed to mimic a typewriter, but like you said with the font, and because I submitted to their most recent issue,
right?
And I was really worried. Well, not worried, but like one of the things was like, I don't know if I want to submit this story just because I don't really want this story in double space, because I always hated double space. I don't know why. It just the way my eyes are, I don't like it. But also, I often format a lot of things in my stories where, depending on the story, I don't think these stories or this story I submitted has it, but sometimes I have headings or like Spencer, he had a story he submitted that was written with like newspaper headings in it, which are centered. And then they're already like kind of double spaced, but the rest of the story's not. But then when you do that double space in the formatting, now you got like a triple space in the fucking, and it just looks weird. And then when you have any scene breaks, it has an extra space. And I don't know, that's one thing I was like, I love those guys, but that drives me nuts. I don't know why they picked that.
Yeah.
I mean, they're consistent through all their books, but it's just like, But anyway, getting back to the topic at hand, I want to end on the Headless imprint. So how did that come to be and your involvement in that?
Okay, I'll try to give you the short version. So I joined the Horror Writers Association and the Science Fiction Fantasy Writers Association at the same time, and volunteered to be on the jury. It would be a juror, and lo and behold, they needed another warm body on the Bram Stoker Awards for short stories. It is a commitment. It is a commitment that lasts about 9 months. Ooh. Where, I almost felt like I was in law school because I'm, after dinner, I'm reading a couple of hours of short stories, and everybody in the world wants to be considered for a Stoker. So they get a lot of submissions. I think this year, that year it was like 700 submissions. And I think I read 300, 350.
Oh, fuck that.
It's set. Well, it's, again, this is probably NDA bullshit, but
I wouldn't want to read horror anymore after that for like a year.
Well, here's the thing is you get assigned, like 10 stories at a time, and then there's a spreadsheet where you mark them red as in like I didn't finish it or whatever.
As I say, if it's dog shit from the get-go, you could just not read it, right?
No, yeah, you can just move on. If there's one where you're reading it and you're like, yeah, there's something here, but it didn't stick the landing, it's yellow. It's like, somebody else take a look at this, please. And then you have, your green where you're like, yep, they hit everything. Boom, boom, boom. Enjoyable story. Had thematic work, something new, something original. And then you label that green, right? And if somebody sees a green, then you usually other people will pull that up to check out a green, right? Nobody goes through and does a red. Or you might say, hey, I can't read cannibal stories, so I can't really judge this one. Somebody else take it, and that kind of thing. I was not into the current horror scene, so I had no idea who these people were, right? And, before they told me to stop reaching out to people that submitted, because I would read a couple good ones and I would reach out to somebody, hey, I read this, and I wouldn't tell them I was with the jury. I'd just say, hey, I read your story. I really loved it, right? It was awesome. And this is a side quest here. I reached out to Tanner Reeve Dew, who wrote The Reformatory and is like an American Book Award winner. Mm-hmm. I didn't know who she was. And I reached out to her, just like, I loved your story, The Biographer. And blah, 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 really, really hit that spot. It's just like really, stuck with me. And she's like, oh my God, it took me 20 years to write that story. I started it when I was younger and blah, blah, blah. We had this nice exchange. And then I actually looked her up and I was like, oh my God.
I'm a fucking idiot.
I'm a fucking idiot. And I saw her at StokerCon and we had a really good laugh about it. But she was like, no, I really appreciate it because nobody reaches out, right? To say that stuff, right? Because I don't give a fuck. I'll slide in DMs. That's how,
What's the thing? If somebody's actually popular enough, they probably get less DMs because they're not going to respond to me. Joe Hill won't respond to me. I'm not going to fucking message him.
Right. So yeah, so that was an eye opener. But there were I didn't know I didn't recognize the names, and that actually, I talk about like you only get 1 year like that, right? Because it was a good year for names and real good professionals. So anyway. At the end of the day, we have to whittle it down to 10. Everybody, submits their 10 to the co-chair, and they number them and rank them, and they end up with the jury 10, top 10, right? And then that gets put on, and it gets matched with the reader's top 10, and then people vote on those top 10, and then the top 5 votes become the official nominated up for the award, right? There were about 20 or 30 stories where I'm like, these are all bangers. I didn't feel like they got enough attention. I book scouted for my publisher. I was a literary director in Chicago for, 15 years. I feel like I have a really good story sense because I've been around all these different writers and professionals and in different mediums, and I can smell dog shit. And I can tell when something is really inspired or not. And again, it's taste is in the room. But I said, look, what you should do, this would really help the Horror Writers Association, is you should do an ebook of like the top 20 or 30 stories. Like I would buy that every year.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Right?
Some places actually do stuff like that.
Right. And they do like best horror. I know Ellen Datlow does her thing. I was like, the Horror Writers Association do this. Like this should be the official Bram Stoker, best of, like those that don't make the final ballot, right? And I kicked up the ladder, crickets. I reapproached them about it, crickets, and I was like, fine, I'll do it myself. That was the genesis of that. I was talking with my publisher, and I was like, we should really. I said, I got an idea for an anthology, and I have access to all these names, all these people that I can reach out to, and I've met a ton of them here at StokerCon. I think we could do this. The horror community is voracious readers. They're very vocal about books they love. The community is diverse. The subject matters are diverse. You have all these subgenres. I was like, this is really cool. And I know you're doing experimental lit with Whiskey Tit, but I'm like, there's something to be said for, solid storytelling in a really good community. And she was like, yeah, that sounds great. You're in charge. I was like, fuck. Okay.
Should have kept my mouth shut.
Yeah.
Yeah. So within 6 weeks, I signed 25 authors, including Tenerife Du, Eric LaRocca, Pedro, I'm going to butcher his last name, Anigas. I had bought a book of his poetry. I was wanted to open the collection with a poem. I didn't know anything about him. He hadn't really hit the scene in a big way. So I signed him, and I was like, fuck it, I love this poem. I'm going to put it in the book. And then he ends up winning that poetry collection, won the Stoker for best poetry collection. He's kind of blown up, but I was like, oh, great. I was an OG with him. Yeah. And that's how it hit. And The Butcher was supposed to come out a year earlier. And I said, hey, why don't we, if we're going to do Headless, let's put out the anthology. That's got more people that would want to read it, got some name recognition. And then we can put The Butcher out on that label. And there was, due to a number of delays and stuff, they ended up coming out at the same time, which is why we did the imprint launch at the folks at Twisted Spine, which is an amazing bookstore in Brooklyn. That's all horror, dark lit.
Yeah, it looked like a good turnout.
They do events. We had a capacity crowd for the Headless launch. They do events 3 or 4 times a week. Ooh. I mean, and people just walk in and listen, and sometimes they buy a book or they get a beer and they just listen to the readings and sign. They've got a really great thing going on, and it was worth it because I live in LA, and we flew out one day, did the event, flew back home the next day. So I mean, it was worth it, but it was a long travel, long trip to do that. But it was totally worth it to see that kind of community. But that's where Headless came from. It was just like, I thought there were stories that I wanted to put out in the world as a collection. We paid $100 flat fee for every story because it was just reprint rights, right? Because they've already been printed, and that actually ends up being more than what the typical reprint.
I'm gonna say that's more than the typical reprint price.
Yeah, because I think it's 2 cents a word. So we had 2 stories that were over 5,000 words. And I said, look, it's Favored Nations. Everybody's getting, $100 flat fee. Are you okay with that since your story is over? And they're like, yeah, absolutely. And I said, there's no exclusivity. If you want to turn around and sell your story again tomorrow, I'm fine with that. So it was an easy yes. Mm-hmm. People like, the thing's already been formatted. Here it is. We Venmo them $100, and at some point we're gonna send out the contributor copies because we just now got them in.
The good thing about reprints too is you don't have to go through all the editing bullshit because it's already been edited most likely.
Yeah, no, it's in. I had a couple of authors. James Bennett, who won the British Fantasy Award, he was in there too, and he was like, yeah, and he goes, oh, but don't use the one I submitted, whatever. Use this one. It's I've just touched it up a little bit. I was like, okay, great, Yeah, so yeah, again, that's why I don't have edited on the cover. I don't know if you've seen the cover. It's that square with the painting, and it looks like an album, right? Mm-hmm. It's square. It's got the OB strip like import albums have, and then it lists everybody on the front, and then it looks like an album on the back with side A, side B, side C, and side D. But I'm credited on the cover and on the back as engineer because I didn't edit these stories.
You didn't actually have to go through.
Right, I just kind of put together and I engineered the whole project. So that was kind of fun to do, and I don't know what we're going to do for volume 2. People were like, are you going to be on a jury every? I was like, I can't.
No.
I can't do that every year. So I don't know. The next one, I think, because it's Connoisseur volume 1, Feast. And so, if we do a volume 2, I think what I might do is I might reach out to those authors and just say, hey, send me a favorite story of yours that never got published. Mm-hmm. And let's do it, and just let them pick. Right. So that would be interesting, to kind of do that concept of, writer's choice.
Yeah, that would be neat.
But we'll see.
I thought about joining the Horrors Writer Association, but I never knew if it'd be the benefits of it, because what I would be doing, because I'm not gonna be on a jury or anything, so I don't know. I probably wouldn't read anything to nominate anything, so I don't know if it'd be really worth it for me or not.
Yeah, I originally joined because they have, we were doing Not Safe for Work, which is horror adjacent, and I was like, okay, let me join the Horror Writers Association. I qualified. And I went through the website, and they have a bunch of reviewer, like a list of reviewers and like Bookstagrammers or whatever. So I joined, and I got that list down, and I started going through it, and the list was like, I think at that point it was like 6, 7, 8 years old, not up to date, end up being pretty worthless to be honest with you. But again, I when I went to StokerCon, I met a lot of wonderful people, made some friends and stuff. So, but I don't even think you have to be in the Horror Writers Association to go to Stoker.
No, I don't think so.
StokerCon. So it depends on what you want to. Looks good on the. I don't know. I don't know if it matters, and they do have a newsletter that you can post shit to. I don't know if anybody reads. It's like the local chapter here, the LA chapter, I think has 500 members, and the couple meetings I've gone to have like 20, 25 people.
Well, that's what worries me is there's so many members around the country and stuff, and just like the amount of work that would be getting shared. I feel like you just kind of get lost in the sauce there. And where we are, I guess there'd probably be a Pittsburgh chapter or something I would have to look into. But I just don't. They would be one of those things like any other fucking thing I join where it's like, oh, I'm involved for a week and then I just fall off and then you don't hear from me anymore. So it's kind of pointless. Yeah. No, I get it, because you really have to weigh the time commitment. And it kind of goes back to like the PR. They're like, I'm paying this woman to find me free gigs to write. And, we do that enough out here, in LA, writing up pitches on spec and writing spec scripts. There's so much work for free. That the same thing too is just like, I need to actually write a book. Yeah. Like that's going to be I'm building a body of work, and that has to be, priority over racking my brain on, like what top 10 blog posts can I write? What list can I write to add to my blog to ask people to go there? So it's just, you've got to decide how far. I've seen some people, I'm just like, I'm astonished at their output. I was like, oh yeah, I was prolific when I was single and didn't have a child. Like I was super prolific, and the ones that don't have single or they're married, don't have kids, like are terminally online, right? Yeah, showing up everywhere, liking everything, kind of getting their name out there and stuff. But it's it's too much. The people I know who have kids and a family but are still terminally online selling their works and stuff, they get so burnt out that they end up just hating everything and then eventually just fall off. So you can't maintain that, I don't think. Even if you are single, I don't see how you can maintain that. Unless you're like a severe extrovert that just loves fucking talking to everybody. Yeah. Networking. I hate networking.
Yeah, it was interesting. My wife worked with Brian Michael Bendis on Powers. She was on that show for a season or two. And she said, yeah, basically he carves out a half a day on Sunday or whatever and does all his social media stuff in one sitting. And then I guess,
that's a good
that stuff gets timed out on schedule. So it's like, it's like meal prep for the week. Yeah. He basically does that. And even then I'm just like,
it's not really organic though, if you're doing it that way. Like it's not genuine. It's just, here's the fucking shit I got to do for the week. Pump it out. And it's like, all right, but I don't want to spend half a day doing that either. Even like,
yeah, I hear you. I mean,
I guess if it benefits you, then yeah, you would if you're making money doing shit like that and it's worthwhile. But for me, like, I don't care. I don't have enough drive to do all that. I struggle enough anymore just making time to write, it seems.
Yeah, no, again, it's a friend of mine's like, yeah, it's a lifestyle choice. Mm-hmm. You have to decide if you're going to write and how much you're going to promote yourself.
Those people enjoy that too. There's a lot of, those are the same kind of people that like putting together character Bibles and have all this extra stuff that goes along with their books and stuff. Some people just really enjoy that. I am not the guy that likes to talk to a million people. Even though we do the podcast, I generally don't go out of my way to seek people out normally.
Yeah, most of my research, I don't usually interview people. I usually, it's all book research and stuff. The great thing about The Butcher was basically, one of the things I read was like, this is what we think we have. This is what we think this is the way it was based on this broken piece of pottery and this rotting ladder. Right. Mm-hmm. So I was like, okay, so
I can some liberties. Yeah,
I can take, but I didn't go crazy with the liberties. One thing with the midwife is like, can she own property? And it was like, oh, if she's a widower, she can maintain the rights to the property. I was like, okay, and nobody's ever questioned.
Well, I remember you saying you had to go back and get rid of orange carrots because you found out they didn't exist.
Oh my god! So I met AC Wise. She's up for a Stoker for like a novella, and I was fortunate enough to where I could get her the manuscript through the Science Fiction Writers Association. That she would look at the first however many pages of The Butcher, and she's like, yeah, I love this. It's great. I hope there's more of the goat. So she might have been the one giving the fish the goat. And she goes, and just FYI, orange carrots weren't around back then. she goes, I think they were, she goes, I don't remember where I heard that, but that's a later thing. And I was like, oh shit. So I looked up, and orange carrots were like a hybrid of white and red carrots that were done in like the late 18th century, I think by the Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, are you fucking kidding? Because, grew up on Bugs Bunny. Every carrot is orange. There's no other color for a carrot. So I was like, shit. So I went back and changed that. And it made me a little bit more careful with, I know the arc you have has a couple contemporary phrases or words in there that I've gone through and combed out, like hoodwinked is, 15th century. Pregnant is a 14th century word. So you do with child. So there's a balance of the research of making it readable without feeling like you're reading a formal transcript from back then. But yeah, the orange carrot thing.
Could have got one historian who read this book,
Yeah.
and then he's already skeptical going in, and he gets to that way. This fucking asshole, 1 star, throw in the garbage, burn it.
Right?
This book is a lie.
Yeah, some carrot farmer, right? It's just throwing that out into the compost heap.
Well, actually, the purple carrots were more prevalent in the. Fuck off. I have a diverse knowledge in ancient vegetables now because I watch a lot of YouTube channel, Max Miller. He makes fucking old foods and stuff, tells you the history of them, which got me in a wormhole of going back to not extinct, but vegetables we don't use. So I actually knew the carrot bit, surprisingly.
Did you? That's awesome.
I didn't know the carrot bit. I didn't, but the funny thing is, reading this, I didn't question it because it's not one of those things where I came across it like, well, that fucking takes me out of the book. Like I didn't really care, but some people do. They get upset about that stuff.
Yeah, so it's amazing what your the tolerance level is for certain things. There's a phrase out here that's awesome out here in Hollywood. They talk about like one buy sci-fi, and it's just like if you buy this one premise, all you need to do is buy one premise and then kind of run with it, right? And I was like, oh, that's great. It's one buy sci-fi. You've got what if people only talked backwards, right? Okay, what's the story from there? So if you buy that concept, you can tell the story. But if you're like they only talk backwards and everybody has a weird haircut and whatever, and then you're just like, you're kind of world building and for sci-fi they want just that one buy in that initial concept. That initial suspension of disbelief, and then you can't do anything else. But yeah, same thing with you. Like I'll read some stuff and I'm just like, that person's never held a gun. This person's never been to the ER. This person's never been. And I understand taking some liberties with it because if you consider novels and stories to be like mythology, what's the mythology? Is something, are the physics more correct, or is it more romantically correct to have it be this way, right? Or optics better than the rules?
What annoys me more when I read something is it's not so much like, oh, that guy's rifle had no recoil. It'd be more along the lines of like, say I read The Butcher of Nazareth and you had a lot of more modern language used. I'm like, oh, this isn't fucking right. That's the stuff that takes me out, is when language doesn't fit the time period, or when they try to make characters sound too contemporary. Even if it's a new book, it's like, okay, but now you have these kids that are talking in a way where next year it's going to be, they don't talk that way anymore. So by the time the book comes out, it's already dated. Like shit like that kind of annoys me.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen books that, were set in the 90s and they're using the vocabulary. Like it has to become a period piece outdate,
Yeah.
You have to set out to write a period piece as opposed to letting something mellow into a period piece. Oh, you had the arc. Okay. So you had the arc. And again, there's a couple of phrases. I think I had the term meal prep in there. We had laid the book in formatting. We had done orphans and widows, and we had done everything as laid out. And I had been basically just yaying or naying my copywriter suggestions, which were mostly commas, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm like, okay, I'm down with the commas because a little older text. I wanted to be kind of more classic that way. And I said, you know what? I need to read this cover to cover, right? I haven't read it cover to cover. I'm just working on pieces and typos and stuff. And I read it, and Caleb, I was like, Spencer, I was like, oh, that word, that's a wrong word.
Yeah.
Okay. That phrase, oh, that's too many words. Oh, this whole paragraph here needs to be rearranged. We had laid the book to rest and we're getting ready to go to print. And I gave Dave 1,000 edits, combing all of that shit out. It had to be close to 1,000, and if you've got 330 pages and you've got three changes per page, let's delete this word. Let's change this word out. And, let's make that a comma instead of a period, and you know what I mean? So it's a lot of work and a lot of changes, and there's a lot of room for, shit to slip through. But at the end of the day, I was like, I can't read it and then get hit with a word that I think is too contemporary? Is that going to trip somebody up? And I want it to be a super clean read. So the version that's going out now is like super clean, all that stuff. I labored over getting, phrases right, or, words right. Like we talked about carrots and pregnancy and hoodwinked, meal prep, all that shit's been broomed out. But yeah, I'm glad I did that, because there was a part of me that's just like, nah, it's fine, it'll be good. But it's like, once it's out, Jesus, if you see one typo in your book or a story when it comes out, you're just like, yeah, it drives you nuts.
Well, if I read or if I'm going to write like a sword and sorcery story or something, I generally find something like a Robert E. Howard or something. I'll read some of that kind of stuff, like the old Conan tale, to get into that mode. Did you have to do it? Yeah. Did you do any reading to get you into this kind of language?
I didn't. What I did was, I did the research, I did kind of the outline, and like I said, I'm always experimenting. As I used voice to text. I have a little device in an app that transcribes. It's basically a voice transcriber, right? Now, the Notes app on the iPhone, the voice to text is horrible. Horrible. My Okie accent comes out and it doesn't understand what I'm saying. And you end up spending more time correcting that. But I use this one transcription device, and it was probably like 99% accurate with what it's doing. So I would do kind of an outline like Larry David in, Curb Your Enthusiasm. I knew where I wanted it ended up. I knew I wanted to hear, and I, here's some beats and here's some characters and stuff. And I would do one or two recording sessions a day where I would kind of like assume the character of the narrator and that kind of voice and narrate the story. And then, at the end of that session, I would hit the transcription, and I would copy it into my Notes app and then pull it up on my laptop and dump it in and reformat it in Word, right? And you go back through and read it. And there's stuff where you're like, scratch that, start over. Okay, this, no, that needs to be this instead of that. But then you kind of get in the flow of the voice, just kind of assuming that, the character thing. Because, I spent, years in theater in Chicago. So it was just kind of like imagining myself as a narrator telling the story. And probably, 80% of the book was written voice to text. And it really worked for me, because when I went back to edit, I had no memory of having written this, right? Because I didn't write it at the keyboard. So it was actually a way for me to get a fresher eyes on something and put it together. And of course I had to go back and rewrite and retrofit stuff. I had to do the whole process, but the initial first draft was mostly voice to text, because my wife was in a TV room and my son was home for summer, and I wanted to spend time with him. And, doing 2,500 words a day was how I was kind of taught. That was my undergrad, and, asked to see it black on white. And there's sometimes 2,500 words, you're just assholing your way from, from 1,200 words to 2,500. You're just assholing yourself. You just want to get to the end of the line, so you're not giving yourself any chance for discovery or to, improvise a moment. So I was doing 500 to 800 words a day, voice to text, and I just was doing it every day. And you do that every day, and it adds up. And and I think that's part of the reason why some of those the smaller sections are not the paragraph, but like you get the X, right? And it jumps to, somebody else's point of view, or it jumps in time.
Right.
Is that I was only kind of writing what really mattered. I wasn't doing a lot of shoe leather. I wasn't doing the quality of the writing, because I was doing in short bursts, and I would always want to have a new idea or two in there, or a cool little hook to end on. The quality of the writing was much richer. And I love that. And I've actually done that with a short story or two. And so I find that that's going to be a big tool for me going forward, because my hands can't keep up with my brain. I'm typing in Word. Everything's got a red squiggle underneath it because the typos, and you're just looking at the language, and but when you're by yourself, in a room or sitting outside, and you've got the thing and you're just recording, and you're just, eyes closed, and you're just imagining it and kind of narrating what you're seeing in your head, it becomes richer. And again, those blocks could have been, I think the longest one I did was a 12-minute stint. I think the shortest was like 3. So, it averages. And it took me a long time to give myself permission to just write 500 words a day and be okay with it. And at the end of the day, I think it's a better quality writing, especially for this kind of book.
Well, the reader will never know that this day was 500 words and not 5,000. They don't care.
Yeah, they better not be able to tell, right? So that was a real revelation for me.
Well, that method that keeps you from getting bogged down in detail. Whereas if you're just sitting at the keyboard, sometimes, at least what I do is, if I'm having a little trouble with something, or the scene's not coming the right way, or the language, I'll end up focusing more on some details that I probably don't even need to be in the story, and overwrite that just to be writing. Then I end up deleting it later anyway. You get it's easy to get in the weeds, right? It's easy to get in the weeds that way.
yeah, like I said, that was a big revelation for me. I talked to people, they asked me a little bit more about it because I like to experiment with process. Screenplays, I say, are math, and stage plays are jazz, right? I wrote most of my plays longhand, because I can do kind of a shorthand for dialogue, so I can actually keep up with what my brain's doing. But screenplays, I unless it's a long dialogue scene, I use Final Draft like everybody else, or I'll do note cards and just brainstorm ideas and then shuffle them and that kind of stuff. I mean, I wouldn't do voice to text for like a screenplay.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it for a stage play unless I was doing a monologue or something. So this was an interesting kind of hybrid process. So the midwife in book 1, visitors come, and she, the midwife was present at the nativity, right? She's the one that helped birth Christ, the baby, right? So she does this little theater performance where she tells the story of the nativity and what happened. I did the voice to text for a monologue for her, as if it was a stage play. She's telling the story because it's set up to be like a theatrical presentation. So she gives this stage play, right? Now, this is a tough scene to write because you've got the midwife, you've got the 5 visitors, and then you've got the butcher in there. That's a lot of people to have on a stage at a time, and how do you serve them all, right? And so I couldn't do that voice to text because there's just too many plates to juggle. So I wrote the monologue, I had that out, and then I went through and I gave her blocking for the monologue. I was like, okay, now we're going to bring up a couple, one of the females and one of the males, and these will be the proxy stand-in for Joseph and Mary, right? And then, the other audience members, I went in and I layered their reactions to stuff and got, because they're not the best audience. And then I layered in the butcher's response to them and what he's thinking is going to happen and what he's going to have to do. So I spent a week on that scene, but the voice to text was the basis for it. And then it was like a painting. I had to go in and layer everybody in because, it's not just the butcher and the goat on the road, right? Which is one pass and I've got the idea down. This one was really sculpted in a way that I kind of did like with the live feed event and Not Safe for Work. When you just got everybody's on deck and shit, a lot of shit is happening to get that going. So that was so when I look back at the monologue, I'm like, okay, this is a good basis, but I know that people want to read just a monologue, a dialogue of the story, even though I get to argue like the oral storytelling tradition, this kind of copies that. I was like, no, you need the reaction shots, and that's one of the things my wife is really about writing in TV and stuff. You always the reaction shot, like what is the emotion of what is the reaction to everybody? That's what's going on in the room, right? And so it's like, oh, right, you need the reactions, like because you watch football highlights, right? If you watch sports highlights and they just show the play and they end the play right there after they catch the touchdown. If you don't see everybody cheering and whatever, you feel like you're not getting the full experience. Yeah, so
it's kind of makes it less real almost.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, here this happened, but I mean the whole thing with sports is to be able to cheer and celebrate in victory and defeat, and if you don't get to bask in that emotional tension release, right?
Right.
So, so I'm always like, oh, play of the day, and it's a 2 or 3 minute video, like I'm going to watch. The play of the day is 10 seconds. I'm like, who
gives a fuck?
Yeah, right, exactly.
All right, well, my ass is numb. So
yeah.
I think we can wrap this up. I'm pretty sure we covered just about everything I had.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Question I could have covered with.
Thanks. I'm so glad you guys got a chance to read the book before coming on so we could actually discuss some of the stuff that's in there and some light spoilers here and there, but
well, I'm really interested to see. I'll probably wait a year or two, but I'm really interested to see what it's like on a reread now that I know the story and everything, see what things I might have missed and just how it unfolds differently in my head. But yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that. Like I said, this was like written in my wheelhouse. This is exactly what I want to read. Like that's
right.
like I love ancient stuff like that, told in the way you told it, and just everything about it was like set for me. So I was like, awesome. As soon as I saw it,
thank you.
Yeah, as soon as you shared the original cover art for that, I was like, fuck, I'm going to have to check that out.
Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you. And Spencer, I know this wasn't really in your wheelhouse, but I know that you still enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It was in my wheelhouse of the craziness and violence and stuff like that.
Which does ramp up a lot at the end, just for anybody who's interested.
But yeah, I haven't read as much like old ancient stuff as Caleb has read, but yeah, but it was definitely in, like I said, once like the shit started to go down, I was definitely
yeah,
which is funny because it starts with shit going down literally.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's it's funny. I had one was like the pace is unrelenting, and then somebody else was like it's a slow burn. And I'm like, well, it opens. It's not a slow burn opening, but book one does builds, and there's plenty of suspenseful stuff in there. But yeah, I don't know. It's again, everybody has a different response to the pacing and speed of a book. It's like George Carlin says about drivers. Anybody driving faster than you's a maniac. Anybody driving slower than you's an idiot. and it's just like, okay, so just ride at your own pace, right?
Well, the opening of that always does always, like, one of my pet peeves is like and this might just be my own thing because like I have my own like stomach issues and stuff like that, and you see these movies and shows and books and like all this crazy stuff's going on. I'm just like, well, when's this person gonna be able to take a shit or go to the bathroom or whatever? And then it just is like it opens up with that. It's like, oh, this guy shits. This guy is realistic.
He's a human.
Well, that was kind of funny because I rewrote the opening. I know we're signing off, but I rewrote that opening. The original opening followed the youth and his encounter with the goat. Right? It was a totally different opening. And then I wrote another one that was like they're all in the caravan and the goat kind of sneaks in and is just with them. And it was real soft. And my undergrad training is like Pulp Fiction. It's just like hook them with the first line. No wheel spinning. Get in there and do it. So I went back and rewrote the opening, and that's where you get the, Butcher's task was simple though arduous: kill one more child. Right? If you ask what's the first line, they're like, "Oh, I would like to know what's going on here because this seems like shit is going to happen." But then you give him that contemplation, and he's contemplating while he's taking his shit, and it was, and that's scatological humor is not really in my wheelhouse. But I was like, "What? I'm going to do something a little different here," and that's again, when he wipes his backside with the scarf borrowed from the perfume merchant, I was like, okay, now this is, he's not just taking his shit, right? This is revealing character and
the purpose.
And it had a purpose, right? And so I kept that in. I toyed with taking that out, but I was like, no, this is too good, especially coming off the more mission that he's thinking about having to do. So
right.
Yeah. So
where can the people buy The Butcher of Nazareth, and where can they find your other work?
Okay, thank you. WhiskeyTit.com. You can order directly from the publisher. That is the preferred. You cut out the middleman. We make more money to fund publishing other books, to the headless imprint. You can also buy bookshop.org. You can buy Barnes & Noble. We are in the system, so you can go to any bookstore and you should be able to order it. They may not have it in stock in terms of in the store, but you can certainly order it. The Butcher of Nazareth is not going to be on Amazon. I worked with Miette to make sure that it was not going to be on Amazon. They really screw people over in terms of the pay that you receive for each copy they sell. They undercut the price. They control the price, so they really can undercut you on everything. And I just didn't want. I wanted people that, like, if you really want to read this book, you're going to have to order it through a bookstore or order it through, or find us at a book festival, because I just didn't want people ordering on Amazon and then turning around and reselling it on Amazon, though that's going to happen at some point. So you can order it through any bookstore, Barnes & Noble. You can order it directly through whiskeytit.com. Asterism.com is our small press publisher, or a small press distribution. What they do is they carry all indie titles. So if you want to buy, say, a book from Malarkey or a book from Tenebris and a book from Whiskey Tit, you can buy all three and you just pay shipping for one. Right? That's the thing with going there, is you can shop multiple indie presses without having to place 3 different orders or 4 different orders or whatever.
That's cool.
All right, well, that's awesome, and we thank you for coming on. This was a fun chat. Honestly, we could have probably gone on for like another couple hours. I just had to fucking edit these things, and also we had a huge fucking windstorm last night, so I have all these trees that fell down in my yard.
Okay, yeah.
So I gotta get out there.
Great. It's always fun chatting. And again, when I listen to the interview and you're like, yeah, Joseph was the original cuck, I was on the floor. Because I can make fun of my own shit, right? And I have friends of mine just like, how do you mock your own stuff? I was like, dude, I take the work seriously, but I don't take myself seriously. Yeah. And also humor, comedy, right? It's there. Right. You're not lying, right? That's what people would think of. So, it's funny. Why? Because it's true.
Right. If you folks want to check us out on the old online social media apparations or something, I don't fucking, my head's a little melted. At DPW podcast on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and I don't know, maybe Blue Sky. I don't think we have. I have a Blue Sky.
You have one, I think.
Never use it. All I do on there is when I get published in something, I put it on there, and everybody says, "Awesome job," and then I never respond. Spencer's OnlyFans. He built a time machine. He's hanging out with the ancient Sumerians, and he is sniffing snails.
Yes,
apparently
for reasons.
It's a sophisticated thing you're doing. What do they smell like?
Snails.
I guess that's what they smell like. All right. Anyway, we thank you for listening, and we will check you out next week with a probably way less, but good episode.
Yeah.
Good episode.
Hey, this is a good episode for the month.
Yeah, you get one.